philosophy of awareness, cultural curiosities, and holographic thinking. You're listening to Serious Wonder Radio. I'm your host, Gray Scott. Our guest today is JASON GREGORY. He is a researcher in the fields of suppressed history, esoteric knowledge, the origins of humanity, Buddhism, Hermeticism, depth psychology, and the occult. All of these subjects are reflected in his writing. Bestowed with this knowledge, JASON continues to focus his energy on dismantling the illusion of separation. You can follow his work at www.oneworldwithin.com. His new book is called The Way of the Weirdo. JASON, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be on, Gray. Thank you for having us on.
We were talking earlier before the interview started about your book, and it really is such a collection of some of the best ideas in all of those fields that you're studying. Why don't you tell our listeners how you got started in this and how the book came to be?
How I began was basically I used to research a lot of conspiracies. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds interesting, but especially back in the early 2000s, mid-2000s, I was into a lot of the 9/11 truth movement, and also, suppressed history as well, which is not known by the masses. And then naturally, as I moved forward through that process, I began to travel the planet. And so I was traveling through Asia and basically living in places like Myanmar, India, Nepal, and I also traveled through the Middle East, which really, these sort of places had a profound influence on me through a lot of the Eastern philosophies, like you mentioned in the intro, Vedantic philosophy, Buddhism, Taoism, and many other ones, even the occult. Like I've been reading about the occult for a long time. Mm-hmm. But that sort of led me into that direction. And as I was traveling, it was almost like I was traveling, even though I was traveling externally, it was almost like I was traveling internally, because things just fell into my lap, and I had my own inner revelations where I began to write again. I was writing articles for many websites, and then it just came to a point where I had a lot of knowledge on a lot of things, but I didn't know how to put it into words, so to speak. So as I kept traveling, it just came naturally. The book just flowed out, and then mm-hmm. I had to obviously go over a lot of things that I knew to make sure everything was can be credited. Everything was not a falsity. So then that naturally came about, and then we have The Way of the Weirdo, and it's a fantastic book, like you said.
Some of the subjects that you cover, the idea of war on the subconscious, the multiverse, bloodlines of presidents, UFOs and aliens, mathematics, and the language of God, and we could go on and on. And actually, these are some of the subjects I want to cover. But one of the interesting things, I think, to sort of set a groundwork for what we're talking about, and after reading your book, I think that we agree on this, that there is something that's very ancient within every culture, and especially the indigenous cultures, that is finally moving into the West. And that is this idea of the illusion. It's something that I've been focused on for a very long time. And you mention it in your book quite a bit. Let's talk about this idea of the illusion.
Perfect. Yeah, I love this subject. Like you said, it's been something that has been suppressed, I suppose, from the West since the dawn of time. Mm-hmm. We find that in all ancient cultures there is the meditation over the mystery of what the mystery is, how we relate to what our environment is, the other, and the self. Mm-hmm. So there's the relationship between those three. And when one delves into their own inner nature, they start to realize that the external world itself is not something that is literally set in stone. It's not. It's something that has came about, how can I say, well, through the dawn of creation. It is something that is here, yet what dwells within us is still from beyond that point. that can see into this reality. Now, like you mentioned, with a lot of the indigenous cultures, when they go into altered states of consciousness, say through ayahuasca or San Pedro or any of these other mind-altering plants, it's to delve into those areas of consciousness where to lift the veil of what this is, what the physical reality is. Does it really exist, the material world? And this is where a lot of them delve. Now, what I find interesting is in the West, since this has been around since for eternity, this sort of knowledge, because it is eternal knowledge. And what's happened as the intellect has developed, as the ego has developed, there's been something that has grown in the West, almost like a cancer, to walk away from that. So we see from the 15 and 1600s, we see the all-out annihilation of indigenous cultures around the planet, and the suppression of this knowledge. And a lot of people think that when they say illusion, that this reality is an illusion, people think that that's something negative. That's not anything negative at all. When you delve into that area of that it is an illusion, then you will be able to see what that ultimate reality is, not the illusion of reality, the ultimate reality. Now, that's not something that's something hard to language to people. This is why a lot of the shamans used to take people through those ayahuasca experiences to try and express to them what that ultimate reality is. Now, a lot of people can experience that through heightened states of consciousness, through constant practices of meditation, yoga, or taking some of the psychedelics, I should say. But it's very hard to language when you get into that mystery of what the absolute is and what the illusion is. Now, I think I languaged it pretty well in the book, but it's interesting in this day and age is where we see fields of science stepping more into mysticism, stepping into that realm. Some of them probably aren't conscious that they are stepping into mysticism, but they are consciously talking about the atom and the electron and about how the reality works and what the consciousness is that drives it. So basically, for someone who kind of does not understand what you and I are talking about, Grays, it's the consciousness that drives the reality. It's not the reality driving the self.
Absolutely.
It's the self driving the reality. So that's the best way I can language of how the illusion works, because when you start to understand that, you know that nothing from outside of yourself has any effect on you, because you are the sole cause of that effect.
I think in the West, it's hard for people to get their head around that, especially if they're really invested in the illusion itself. And it's so easy to do that because we all do it. I mean, even for the researchers like you and myself and other people, it's just habitual, right? We fall into this state of movement. That's what it is. I mean, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I think to be a really good researcher, and this is what I got from your book too, is that in your book, it sort of flowed. There were moments where you sort of dove into the illusion and sort of dissected that, and there were moments where you came out of it and sort of talked on a deeper level that way. And I think that's how we're living our lives if we're balanced. The thing that I fear, and you tell me what you think about this, the thing to be feared is the extreme on either side. Because then you lose sight of what we're here for, right?
It's perfect you mentioned that, because this is where balance comes in. It's a balance between the two. Now, what's happened, I suppose, in Hinduism, they call this the breath of Brahma or the breath of Brahman, where you go outside of yourself into the illusion, and then sometimes you come back into your inner self, and then there is that constant breath. Even though people don't visualize that or sense that as a breath, it's actually a breath happening, like you're going out and you're going in constantly. Now, like you said, there can be extreme polarities where one may go so far within that there is, I suppose, a disassociation with the illusion, with the external world. I'm not going to say that that's either right or wrong. That's for the individual to experience. But I think to to be into the illusion so much. That's what's destroying the planet. It's the constant pull out of yourself and believing that the external world is something to conquer. It's something that we own instead of something that just is, and is part of our manifestation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there needs to be a fine balance. You always see in the ancient, in esoterica, you see Hermes Trismegistus with the scales, always talking about balance, balancing that polarity of both, because there can be a fine line. And, when one gets into that sync of what that cosmic breath is, that involution and that evolution, then you start to step into a realm which is what they call beyond karma, which is actually getting into the eyes of the observer and just observing yourself going through the out and in breath. So in a lot of, in Vedic terminology, they call, like, Isha refers to the source of creation, and Kriya, that refers to an inward action to that source of creation, and karma actually means nothing really to do with cause and effect. It means, it does, to a certain extent, but not the way that in the West we think it. Karma actually means an outward extension from Isha. So I think that's probably the best way to understand it. There's Kriya, there's the inward action towards what that is. And that's what I believe what's happening a lot at the moment. There's a lot of people taking that journey back within instead of living their karmic existence. So, yeah, so to live that karmic existence would be to live totally in the illusion and to be bamboozled by what it is. And like you said, like in Way of the Weirdo, there was that ebb and flow where I did go into the illusion of the Illuminati bloodlines, even to the extent of suppressed history about aliens and our neighbors and other planets. Like, this is all still delving into the illusion, but for some reason when I wrote the book, there was still that impulse that I needed to write that. Now, like you said, like in some way we all still are delving into it. We're not totally going away from it. Maybe if we did totally go away from it, we'd all be saints. Like, I'm not sure. But there is that constant breath. And I don't think, like you said, I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. If someone's stepping in and stepping out, as long as you're not stepping out and believing that that's who you are, that defines who you are. Once you get into that realm, then you're totally caught by the illusion of Maya.
And in a lot of ways, I think also that the subjects that people get caught in, the illusion that they get caught in, it actually is a beacon to what is actually going on inside of them. So it's interesting when I was reading your book, there were parts of it that, let's say like the 9/11 truth information. My thing is, history is written from perspective. And even when you're in the room, and this is what people have a hard time with, even when you're in the room, you're still circling the illusion. So it's very hard to say what is actual fact, because in reality, it flows. There is no stagnant truth, right? So it's hard. I get sort of thrown off when people want to pin down a specific theory or conspiracy. I mean, on the general scale, you get the breeze, right? You get the idea of the breath that is not just the illusion, but the conspiracy. We know these things exist, right?
Yeah.
Let's say getting infatuated with this idea of the conspiracy is where people get lost, I think, because they forget that it is a part of the illusion. It's very tempting to go down that road, isn't it?
Definitely. Yeah. It is. And I think a lot of people do get bamboozled by the conspiracy because, as you know, Gray, in my book, in the truth chapter, that was the whole discussion about what truth is. Like, exactly. How do we dissect what really is truth? It is only perspective from every individual's eyes. So how is that truthful over whatever you have? Like, even if I had an opinion on 9/11, who I thought did it and what I thought the motive was. Is that truly true, or is that just my opinion? In the end, it's only my opinion. It's only my learned opinion. Now, this is why in the end I not walked away, I just naturally grew out of the 9/11 truth movement, because I was taking another journey where I could, it's, for me, it's paradoxical to say that that's 9/11 truth, because, what is truth? That's the whole,
Yeah, exactly.
that's the whole blight of humanity. What is truth? I believe there is that ultimate truth, which I discuss in the book. But once again, that could be still my perspective. Some people do have a deep knowing about that. And to pin down facts and say that this is the way it is, that's part of the reason why we're in the situation we are at the moment, because we have a lot of people in this world saying this is the way it is, get used to it, these are facts. And that's the problem. So I think for those who do delve into conspiracies, look, I myself do still enjoy the odd conspiracy theory, but I don't invest my energy into it. But for those who do, just be careful, because it can pull you into a different version of reality. But like you said, at certain times in your life, those certain things do reflect certain things about your nature. So once again, it's a process for the individual to go through. Even if they're so crazy into whatever conspiracy it is, there's something about them that needs to go through that experience. And it's not for you and I to say, hey, don't worry about that, we've got the answers over here. Just let them go through that experience.
The only thing that I can say at this point, and especially after reading your book, is that truth is really not the right word, right? We're really talking about something else. We're talking about, because truth, the word truth itself makes it polarized. What we're really talking about is structure. I think that's there is an ultimate structure, right? Can we say that?
Yeah, we could say that, yeah.
So if we say there is an ultimate structure, and that structure has to be numerical, mathematical, wave, vibration, then there's room to play with conspiracy and with the internal struggle, because there are peaks and valleys to the wave. So it's like what you were saying, it's an in and out breath. I mean, should we be talking about structure maybe instead of truth?
Yeah, definitely. Because, like you said, truth, it's polarized, because there's truth and false.
Yeah.
So and that's why I mentioned to you, like, what in the end is truth. It's not something that is polarized. Like, what the word actually means doesn't mean something that's polarized.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably a better word. It's a structure of what existence is, of what reality is, and what consciousness is. Because then you can, once you understand the structure of anything, you can sort of understand why it has its place. I don't know if you're familiar with some of the Hermetic laws in the universe, but like the first three are examples of how these three are immutable laws, where you have the law of mentalism, the law of correspondence, and the law of vibration, which basically are the you could say the foundation of the other four 7 Hermetic principles. So when you have the law of mentalism, that means that consciousness is first, and then law of correspondence means that you yourself are one with the universe. You're actually a living, breathing universe, and then there's the law of vibration, which starts to bring the matter and the universe into manifestation. So I'm like yourself. I go down those sort of avenues of understanding more about what the reality is and how we are part of that, not separate from it. And that's why I love certain texts like the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching and all of these ancient books, especially from Chinese philosophy. They delve into that area of opening that space up where there is no truth, there is no Gray or Jason, there is none of that. And then once you reflect on that, then you can sort of start to understand what is truth then. So, and once again, this is only experiential. It's not something for, it's something that I suppose science will try to language in the future, but I think they'll fall short. I think what they're looking for in this world is something they'll fall short of an answer, because it is a process that we're going through. It is a journey. The universe is constantly moving. It's constantly moving. It's always moving. It's not something that's stagnant. We've got the illusion in our mind that the universe is stagnant and we can hold on to the current of this flow, and we're never going to do it. It's sinking in with that process of what's happening, and when you understand that you are part of that structure, then that's when that certain space will open up.
No, I agree with you. I think the structure is what the ancient histories, the ancient cultures, the indigenous cultures, I think they were trying to talk about. They were less concerned with truth. They were more concerned about what is the structure that we are floating on, I guess is the right way to put it.
Yep.
I think the first time I realized that something really miraculous was going on was when I realized in so many ancient cultures, the pattern of the flower of life, we find it everywhere. And I think that was the first time that I realized that there was an ancient knowledge that was very, very sophisticated. In your travels, did you see, I mean, obviously the areas that you were in, you must have seen the flower of life, the pattern.
Everywhere. It's actually everywhere, Gray. When you travel, especially through Asia and the Middle East, you almost can't miss it. You can go to the Golden Temple in Amritsar in North India and Punjab there,
Yeah.
and it's everywhere on the tiles on the floor, and it's like, this is an ancient temple, and it's in India. And then you go to the Temple of Osiris in Abydos in Egypt, and it's singed into the granite walls, like singed, like, so that's an amazing thing. But then you're looking at places, we're talking, 5,000, who knows, 5,000 kilometers away from each other.
Yeah.
That the same symbol is discovered, like, and that's amazing. It's part of the ancient cultures, like you said, and there's that ancient mathematics about it. There's somehow there was that deep inner knowing in the ancient times, and then the flower of life came about. And the flower of life can symbol many things. It can symbolize the platonic solids. It can symbolize a lot of other things, deeper mathematics, the golden ratio, and how all that relates to consciousness. Yeah. So with the flower of life, I guess there was that deep understanding of how the sacred mathematics work within the structure, and somehow this is what a lot of in the West, a lot of people can't understand, is how people who can live in nature, in harmony with nature, can have access to these higher forms of structure, how they can have a deeper understanding of how the structure works. Because these days we have the sciences there, we have quantum physics, and we have the electric universe theory, where they have their own opinions on the universe, but it always comes to a stage of, it comes back to this sacred mathematics. It comes back to this one of the symbols, which is the flower of life. It comes back to that, which encompasses everything. Where you have the two lines of the outside on the outside, and then within you have the form. You have the form of the universe within those two circles. Now, a lot of people have different opinions on those two circles. I'm not going to, like, a lot of people say it symbolizes the duality of the universe, and then there's the manifestation. I'm not going to say that's either right or wrong, but the fact is that these mathematics have came about through these indigenous cultures, through the ancients, and we see it reflected into their ancient architecture, the archaeology. You see the pyramids, you see a lot of the temples. You can go throughout Asia, all through the temples, and throughout South America and Central America, even North America, to see a lot of these structures that work with sacred geometry and sacred mathematics. And the amazing thing is when you look into such things as that, you see that mathematics reflected into the nature around us, the natural world, not just the man-made world, the natural world. So these are obviously higher states of consciousness that individuals reached back in a day that was much more in tune with what the relationship was between the self, the other, and the natural world. We don't have that. We don't have that understanding of what that trinity is at the moment, because we only have an understanding of sort of how to conquer the other and the natural world, and we have no idea of what the self is. So I believe that once you delve into that area of yourself, then a lot of these things become they just become apparently clear of how the structure is built in this universe and why it's there. I guess no one can finally say what the truth, well, there's that word again, but what the basis of that structure is. No one can say what the purpose of that structure is. All that you can say is that somehow it is mathematically complete, yet it is something that is constantly moving, which is paradoxical, but that's probably something that the intellectual mind can't understand, but the spiritual mind could. If that sort of answers your question, Greg.
No, it makes complete sense. And the thing that I find so fascinating about this pattern that we find out, because I saw it in India and I saw it in Egypt as well. And what I find so interesting is that when you look down to the beginning of the human embryo, you're seeing this pattern. When you look at specific mathematics, you're seeing this same exact pattern. And my question to you is, and this, obviously we're just talking about theory of the structure, really.
Yeah.
And my question is, let's say we had a catastrophic planetary disruption. Let's say Saturn was moved somehow out of its alignment. I think obviously it would change a lot of things in the universe, but it would also change a lot of things on this planet. It would change the math. It would change the way things develop. And see, that's where people sort of fall away from the illusion, is that once you start to realize that everything is interconnected, from the alignment of the planets, cell structure in human beings, the way we develop, the Fibonacci sequence, and how plants grow and all these different things, then you start to realize what you're saying in your book about how the separateness of things, it's just an illusion.
Exactly. Well, like what you said, if you move Saturn out of its alignment, we would be living in a totally different.
Oh, there'd be troubles.
There'd be troubles. Yeah.
We would have some troubles. Yeah. So
well, we have this idea, like it's been mentioned a lot to me about space travel, like how we humans would operate in space travel. Now, it may only be my opinion, but we are in all ways connected to everything. But I believe we are the eyes and ears of the Earth, and we have a relationship with the sun and with the moon. Mm-hmm. Now, the moon is reflected into the cyclical patterns of women. And what would happen if we were to take, say, a female away from the Earth, say onto Mars? What would happen to, the mathematics of the female structure? What would happen to the patterns of their cycles? Mm-hmm. Would it be altered? Would it be altered to that planetary body's cycles?
It'd have to be, I would think.
It'd have to be, yeah. So this is why, in some way, people say to me then, like when I mention this, they say, so this is a prison planet. And I don't see it that way, but, if they want to see it that way, yes, they can. But because in some way we're connected with this planet, and the sun and the moon are magnetic opposites. They're one's masculine and one's feminine, one's fire, one's water, and that they're the base elements. Mm-hmm. So they're the core structure of our structure, which gives, what's the creative of the sun and the moon? It's the earth. That's the creative principle of both of them. Mm-hmm. And so we're living on this as the eyes and the ears of it. And if you were to move the moon out of proportion from where we are, then what would happen to this place? Obviously, there'd be the relationship with the oceans, and that would be a lot different. But the structure of women would begin to change.
Mm.
So,
And men probably too, eventually. I mean,
oh, definitely in men, like, because
that's where we come from.
that's yeah, exactly. So, and we only have to see the way that the moon affects consciousness,
Yeah.
collective consciousness. So, if it was to be moved away, then who knows what would happen. But I don't think that would ever happen, because once again, there's something mathematically complete about what we live on, but we don't see that interconnectedness. We don't see that ultimate reality. We see the illusion.
Well, and it could also be, and I've thought of this many times as well, is that time, the way that human beings think of time is not accurate. We know that. We think of time from the human perspective, but what we don't realize is that, plants are moving. They're just moving at a very slow rate. And there may be vibrational entities moving at a faster rate that are moving so fast that we can't see them, we can't perceive them, and they may be all around us. So when you start talking about the alignment of the planets and so forth, what I find so interesting is that 50 million years within the universe is just a blink of an eye. The human existence may only be able to exist within a very short window. And it may just be that the moon happened to be where it is within this window that we are allowed to be in existence. And as that changes, as that evolves, we will also move away. We won't be here anymore. In a million years, people say, well, let's try not to destroy the earth. Let's not blow ourselves up and all this. It may not be a matter of that. It may be a matter that we are a single note being played in a symphony. That's how short our consciousness may be allowed to exist. And then we may move on to something else. We may ride that wave of consciousness, but we may not materially be able to stay here in this way. I mean, it's what you said. If the moon were to lose its alignment, it would change everything.
Exactly. And the universe is constantly, out of control. It is in not a state of chaos, but it is constantly moving. So, like you said, we could be that single note in the symphony. We could just be one of those notes, and then that higher form, that higher vibration and structure, it'll morph and it'll change. Maybe there'll be something higher than even what consciousness is, if that makes sense to anyone.
Oh yeah.
But because there's infinite realms out there of what is possible. So I suppose everything through a clear perspective has a purpose and a process of evolution. But with what you're saying, Gray, it's beautiful, because this could just be one of those single plucks on the guitar string that we're going through at the moment. And then next minute there isn't going to be the earth, there isn't going to be the moon or even the sun. There may be a whole different, we cannot even imagine what it could be. But once again, what were we before? What was consciousness? What was the consciousness like before it came into the human form? And no one can sort of delve back into that area. There can be a lot of things that is reflected into mythology about that, but no one can say exactly for sure how the consciousness was expressed before human life came into being. And once again, that doesn't mean that human life's always going to be here. If the evolution is constant, then there is going to be maybe a phasing out. And a lot of scientists say that, we're talking physically here, that, eventually, the Earth will be an icicle. It'll be like Neptune or Uranus. It'll just keep expanding outward from the sun, and then it'll disappear. No, I'm not going to say that's right or wrong, but that's a physical understanding of how the universe is expanding, but of how the consciousness is growing. We may be getting what we are probably experiencing at this moment, even with the expansion in consciousness at the moment, is we may be expanding even out of the human form, but we're not even conscious of it, because we can't even intellectually understand what that experience would be like. Like you said, there is potentially other realms of reality happening all around us, and because our consciousness is fixed into a vibrational structure that we are locked into, we can't have access to that.
Are we completely isolated from that? I feel like in great moments of mystery or magic or meditation, deep meditation, there is something that is beyond words. And I do think, and moments like I've had experiences with ayahuasca where you just touch it, but it's something that you can't describe. But I think it's what you're talking about. You're touching the edge of whatever that is. But I just don't think language, Terence McKenna had this entire lecture about small mouth noises not being adequate. And it's so true. I mean, there's just not a vibration that could come out of our voices that would explain what we're trying to grasp. And,
I think this is where science will fall short, because like you said, when you delve into the mystery, it's almost like you get to the edge, but you can never touch it.
Yeah.
It's like a riddle that can never be explained, something that can never be answered. Now, a lot of people like to have their answers, but that's a good meditation. Imagine never truthfully understanding what existence is, what it's all about. And when you delve into that mystery, never truly understanding what people with language, what God is. There's an ancient occult analogy where it's, you may reach the candle, but you can never touch the flame. Certain things like this about delving into that mystery. And through it's that concept is reflected into a lot of the ancient scriptures. Like you can read a lot of those scriptures, especially the Vedas and the Tao Te Ching, and you could even read in the Quran and the Bible, where it's just speaking about that mystery, but it's something that you can never fully comprehend, but you know of its exist. Well, of what it is, there's that something there, but you're not in that, which is that's probably difficult for people to understand. But when you delve into that area internally within yourself and trying to dive into that mystery, it's kind of interesting, because when you follow that, it leads you into such a beautiful life. Like there's many things open up in your life, it's beyond words. You can't explain it, why those certain things come into your life. It's beyond the intellectual understanding of it. And Terence McKenna was right, like words are inadequate. There's something that can't be explained here. It's not through words anyway.
Well, and the biggest mystery of all, and when you really start diving into this, the real issue is that we don't even know what the question is. You know what I'm saying? I mean, when you start to really get into this, you start realizing that we don't even have the right questions yet. And that's where the mystery and the magic lies. And that's what makes life so beautiful, is that you can seek out your own questions. And I want to get more into that. We're going to take a break for a second here, but we have a lot more to talk about. I'm very excited about having Jason with us today. And to listen to part 2 of this interview with Jason Gregory, visit our website at www.seriouswonder.com and follow the subscriber link at the top right-hand corner of our website to receive weekly radio interviews, news articles, and short documentaries.